Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Health Matters podcast. Saul Marquez here, hosting today's episode. I have the privilege of hosting two distinguished health leaders, and I want to introduce them to you today. First, I want to introduce you to Frank Webster. He is the Chief Medical Officer of Behavioral Health at HCSC. I also have Amir Azarbad with us. He is the Managing Director of 10 Pearls Healthcare Practice, focusing on strategic and technological solutions. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
I would love to begin the podcast by really just asking you guys, what is it that inspires your work in healthcare?
Sure. I'm a psychiatrist by training, run emergency psychiatric services, doing two at the same time, which is really stupid. And I don't recommend anyone try to do that. One of the things that you do when you see that, and also just working in the managed care side of things, you begin to see where the holes are in the system. And those are not just academic concerns that, the system could be better. Now, those are people that aren't getting services that they really need to get to be stable. And it really begin to think systematically. I like to say I have an engineer brain and a psychiatrist's body, and Dad was an electrical engineer. That's how I think. So when I start seeing systems and things not working correctly, it just drives me up the wall. So that motivation to really address things in the healthcare system, especially around behavioral health care that aren't working well, is really what has been driving me, and probably to the point of distraction now for several years.
I love it, Frank. Thanks. Your motivation is palpable.
I've been told that before, maybe. Yeah.
Amir, how about you?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's just the healthcare industry is in general, just as part of GPD span has been it's a broken system, and there's so much opportunity to fix it. There's so much opportunity to get in and make a change. I've been fortunate the last 20 years of my career, all of my career, I should say, outside of a small stint at a bank, has been focused on healthcare and trying to figure out how do you move the needle in healthcare? And it's very interesting being at conferences like this and doing other things and hearing all the buzzwords and all the different new technologies and new solutions. But at the end of the day, it's still an old sort of system that needs to keep moving forward, that's not really focused on buzzwords, etc. So it's just been interesting trying to figure out how do you move the needle slowly, practically, so that things get done, versus dreaming pie in the sky and hoping that it happens, and then every 5 years re-strategizing. And so I'm excited. Healthcare is a place that is in desperate need of innovation, and it's exciting to be a part of it.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that, Amir. And it's certainly great to have that commitment, right? It happens over a long span, and you got to take bites of the elephant. Okay, great, guys. Thank you for getting to know you a little bit better. And so maybe let's kick it off with Frank. As a health plan, what are some of the unique challenges you face as one of the largest customer-owned health insurers in the U.S.?
HCSC is a mutual legal reserve company, which means it's member or customer-owned, and it's not-for-profit. Now, there are clear advantages of being not-for-profit healthcare. You don't have to worry about quarterly earnings reports. You don't have to worry about layoffs if somebody were underperforming by 2% points off our either revenue or margin targets. But the disadvantage is sometimes they don't pay as much attention to the financials as they probably ought to, and it's difficult to raise capital. You can either borrow money or you can make money off of operations. There is no stock. So unlike some of our competition, we can't issue 5 million more shares and raise capital immediately on that. It has to be done. It takes us years, if we're not borrowing it, to raise enough capital to actually make strategic investments in healthcare infrastructure, around healthcare strategic investments and partnerships. Those are expensive. And it takes 5 years to get to a point where you can actually really start exercising some of those options that our competition can just issue stock on and do very quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. There's many companies that consider themselves healthcare solutions providers. And so what would you say sets 10 Pearls apart from the rest?
Yeah, I think it comes back to being a practical, pragmatic sort of outlook on it. We do a lot of work across the payer space and the provider space, and it has to do with us going to them with practical strategies. Like, achievable, here's the couple of steps you got to take. Here are the things you're going to get done. It's easy to go in like our competitors and come up with a 100-page deck and put it in front of the executives and say, this is the dream, this is where you should go. The alternative, and what's worked really well for us and what sets us apart, is our ability to actually be very sort of step-by-step focused on delivery of a solution, have the conversations, people involved, not try to take a big bite out of the pie, but like slowly get yourself towards that. And so as our clients have started to see true deliverables and true go-to-market and frankly market differentiator products, that's really what sets us apart. We're able to say we're going to do something and do it slowly and get there versus here's a 100-page deck, go get X millions of dollars, it's going to take you 5 years. As Frank can attest, we've been delivering products every 4 weeks to production. That's a whole different shift in mindset within the payer space specifically, because everyone's so used to, well, here's the money, we'll see it at the end of the year, hopefully. Oh, you missed the target. Let's put another business case, go forward. So from a 10 Pros health perspective, we are truly good steward of the dollars for our clients and want to make sure results in an agile way in a industry that's really not agile.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Amir. So Frank, do these types of capital challenges, partnerships like the one with 10 Pearl help?
We pay about $3.8 billion in behavioral health claims every year alone, and that's not counting our Medicare, Medicaid business. I have to get and calculate that slightly differently. But the company itself made about $54 billion a year of revenue, 27,000 employees, about $150 million a year of claims paid. So it's a huge company. And like all huge companies, especially in something that's as complex as healthcare, there is no one person who knows everything that goes on in the company. It's too large, too complex. That's just human nature. So you have to manage through kind of cooperation and collaboration. And you tend to get things siloed because we silo by state and we have different lines of business. So behavioral health, we're in an advantage because we're an enterprise shop. So I'm over all 5 states. I'm over all of our lines of business to some extent. And so when I think about how to get something done, I'm thinking about a solution for the company. When our Texas team or Illinois team or whatever, they may be thinking, I need a solution for our area. So when we started talking with Amir and working on this, we built a clinical data aggregation tool. All states, all lines of business, not behavioral health, it's medical data, it's everything. Most of our 800 or 900 users now are on the medical side of the house. About 20% of them are on the behavioral health side of the house. Yet even today, and I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, still get asked, so this is a behavioral health tool? Or is this for Texas? Or does it include Medicare, Medicaid? I'm like, the answer is yes, it includes everything. And it's still, people are they get confused.
Like amazed that it works that way, that seamlessly?
Because the other parts of the company Texas doesn't want to pay for Illinois. Totally understandable because of the structure of the company. And this is normal. This is true in all Blues, all health insurance entities. And if you want to try to get everybody to cooperate, they will, but that can add a year or two to the conversation. We were just very blessed to be able to work with Amir, find some dedicated people internally who are working, as we needed those internal IT resources. Amir's resources were very reasonable. And we got users who are physicians and other clinicians. Hey guys, these are the clinical data that we have, and this is what's in the pipeline to get. What do you want? How do you want to see it? And we let the users dictate what they needed to see. And that's why it's been a popular and highly used tool versus historically, Steve might put in a business case. They would actually do extra work to filter data for maybe certain lines of business or states, because to me, that's actually harder to not collect the information than it is if it's just there, pull it. And so we really had to work in a different way than our company is normally used to working. And I think we got this done way under what we would have done internally and much faster. And the fact that we can make a change almost immediately, which would be very difficult to do because we have a very large structure that it's just baked into the structure of the company. So the fact that we were able to do this in such an agile fashion, it's hard to do that in a company our size. It's not because it's bad, it's just because our company is better with very large projects. Something this small almost doesn't even show up in the radar. Yet the value of the data that we have in there is actually really critical, because if we want to be a clinical company that's working off clinical data, we need to be able to display that stuff quickly and easily.
That's great, Frank. Thank you for highlighting that. And it sounds like a win. I mean, it sounds like a win.
We're thrilled. My boss loves it, who is the chief clinical officer for the entire company and is a family practitioner. And this is great. So, yeah.
Love it. That's great. What a great story. And I appreciate you sharing that. So, look, we're here at Health 2023, and AI has definitely been the buzz here and a lot of conferences and everywhere. Where do you see AI having the most significant impact on payers?
Yes, AI is the big buzzword, just like digital transformation was 3 years ago, and I don't know what was before that. There is a real opportunity for AI done right and being practical about it to really transform the payers. And it's not about trying to completely remove everybody from the equation. AI is not going to all of a sudden magically reduce everything, your administrative costs, your people costs, your claim costs. It's not going to just happen overnight. But if you think about AI in the most pragmatic way, what it will enable you to do is make your people more efficient. When you allow your people to be more efficient at their job versus having to go through 10 systems to collect data or looking through a medical record notes to try to figure out what's going on. If you can use AI in more practical ways, then your people are going to be more efficient, which ultimately is, as a member owned, for example, with HCSC, that's good for the members, right? That helps with premium costs. That helps with all those things. AI from a practical sense, and there's a whole authorization piece of this that AI could help with. There's a lot of machine learning and algorithms that can manage the members' risk continuum and be able to predict if someone's going to be moving from one level to another and those things based on prior data. The reality of AI is everyone wants to talk about and say everything's driven by AI. Then there's a reality within the healthcare space, which I'll let Frank talk through. AI needs good data and it needs to have access to that data. If you have garbage data, AI is going to give you garbage results. And there's a real discussion within the healthcare industry around who has the data, how do we aggregate all the data, how do you get the provider data out of the EMRs, what do you want to do with the payer data, what about the consumer data, all the wearable information, how do you bring all that together? Then AI will make a significant difference. But if it's segmented data, AI is only going to be as good as that segmented data is.
I would agree. And I think the biggest problem in healthcare, and frequently by the people advocating an AI product, is basically they're assuming AI is equivalent to magic. It's not. It's basically a fancy algorithm, maybe with self-coding, self-training capability, which is still a really good algorithm. What are algorithms useful for? Pattern recognition, pattern matching, right? But you have to have the right data. So what do most insurance companies have? We have claims data. Claims tells you what the diagnosis was, what procedure was performed, who the provider was, who the patient was, how much it cost, what date did it happen on. It doesn't tell you anything about why. If you're going to make decisions in healthcare, well, why is a decision was made or not made is critical. So you have to go beyond claims data. You have to go to something that actually is reflective of somebody's clinical condition. And that could be something as simple as a PHQ-9 standardized 9 rating scale for depression. Now that's direct clinical data. That's not a claim. It's also real time instead of frequently 90 days in arrears. So the type of data that you're getting direct access to clinical data or electronic health records, that's where there's a possibility through, and I don't even like to use AI because people misuse it all the time. So I would say things like natural language processing, where you can optical character recognition, read charts, create constructs in the language of what certain conditions may be assessed as, and then actually really begin to work on those constructs, train them, make sure that you're seeing what you're seeing. There's also a lot of variability, especially in behavioral health care. The diagnosis itself does not always drive the treatment. It does more so a little bit in the medical side, but there's behavioral health. You can get a diagnosis of depression, and people might do multiple different types of psychotherapy on it. They may or may not refer for medications, et cetera. So understanding that there's a lot of unexplained variability. Some of it is probably a problem. A lot of it isn't. But this is where AI is going to really struggle, because when you start looking at how people receive care in the behavioral health system, where AI is going to be useful once we have more information and we can begin to automate certain routine decisions, but it's going to really struggle because the patterns actually aren't going to look like they would on the medical side of the house. And one of the huge things that we see in any large healthcare entity that has behavioral health, there's an assumption that medical looks just, or behavioral health looks just like medical. It's completely different. But if you looking at the data with the assumptions, what you need is a diagnosis and a procedure code and a medical policy, and then you'll be able to do it. No, that doesn't work for behavioral health. Everything's subjective, because behavioral health decisions are made on subjective level of impairment, not the diagnosis, the procedure code. It's the level of impairment that drives whether somebody needs a certain level of care or not. That's very subjective and can be reported quite variably. So we're a long way away from major impact in behavioral health space, a little closer in medical, I think. But again, it's really best for routine things. You want your clinicians to think clinically, because right now, when things aren't automated, your clinicians are doing routine, repetitive, mundane tasks that could easily be done by a machine, and then freeing up that time to think critically. What I want is for our clinicians to spend a little time on routine stuff and more time than they're spending today, which freaks out people when they're thinking about admin cost reduction. I want them to spend more time per case on more complex things, because that will actually help us make better decisions. So I view the AI's best role in the next 5 years as in freeing up clinical resources to focus on more complex scenarios. Now, that not everyone agrees with me on that, and there are a lot of interesting conversations, but that I'm happy to be proven wrong. I love being wrong, because when somebody explains why I'm wrong, I get smarter.
You get to learn.
It's so cool. It's so much less boring than if I'm right on something, because that is the most boring outcome of any conversation I can imagine.
I love that, Frank. You're such an engineer.
I might have heard that comment a few times before.
You don't know how true that statement is.
I love that. No, that's great. And the bottom line, thank you for that, right? You have to be objective. You have to understand the applications. And really, it's not a catch-all. Great feedback there, Frank. And Amir, it's about clean data, right? It's about making sure that the data that's being leveraged for the areas that it can be leveraged in is clean, it's well organized. You guys, this has been a really great discussion. We could honestly do a part 2 on this. It's been so much fun, but we're here at the end. So what I'd like to do is ask you both for a call to action for the listeners, and then we'll conclude.
Yeah, I teach health informatics too, so I'm sledgehammering the same thing as I say to everybody. You need to understand what your data can tell you and what it can't, because the minute you're asking questions of your data that it is not able to answer, but the problem is most people don't know that there are limitations to the data or what those are. You've got to understand the implications of that, because when you are getting recommended, if you're training for AI or decision making, that training set is actually not the set that you need. You're going to make really lousy decisions. And there are definitely negative implications of that. It's like you need to pay attention to details. Nobody in our country likes details. They bore me too, and I get it. But that's that ability to critically think and to critically not accept what you're handed with AI or about your data, and to actually understand what it's telling you, what it isn't. That's going to differentiate people or in organizations that are successfully executing on this and from the ones that aren't.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think feeds in really well into sort of our view of, from a 10 Pearls perspective, we always want to start with the end in mind and then work our way backwards and ask some of those challenging questions up front. Because I think it helps everybody think, what is it that you're really trying to do versus did someone come up with a shiny object and waved it in front of you? This is the greatest idea I've heard, right? We love to work through that with our clients. What we've done with Frank and with HCSC has been a very good example. What I would say to folks that are listening is get in touch with us. Don't just settle for the traditional way of doing things. Healthcare is ripe for change. There's always opportunities now with AI, and there are other tools, but it needs to be practical. And that's, I think, what sets us apart from a 10 Pearls perspective. We'll put the path forward. We'll have the right conversations. We will challenge. We will give you point of views. And then ultimately we all agree. And then it's about incremental value for our clients, delivery, and success versus all right, I'll see you in a year and hopefully this is what you wanted, because you can see how fast technology changes. I look forward to continuing this discussion, and for folks who are listening to reach out to us, and let's have a very practical discussion on what we can do to help you going forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Amir. And thank you, Frank. And folks, thanks for tuning in to this podcast. For quick ways to get in touch with Amir or Frank, you'll see it in the show notes. So make sure you check them out, reach out to them, and take action on the very practical advice that we got from both of them today. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.